All right, so let's talk about the response paper due Friday night at 11:59 through Jupiter grades. Please don't turn it in late. Let's look at the directions here. Write a response paper about a part of the Odyssey that we have read together. So anything up through book 9, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 9. Describe your reaction to some character, event, theme, or other aspect of the book. Your response may be positive or negative, but material from the book and good reasoning. You do not need to use any external sources for these papers. Do not simply summarize the book. Pick one thing. It should be a small thing. One particular event, one particular character, one particular relationship, or it could even be, one or a couple particular lines of the book even. This is a very short paper. It's only about a page and a half, same like as the other ones, 400 to 600 words. You're not going to have time to give substantial thoughts about some large thing. You're not going to be able to talk about all of book 9, for example. You're not going to be able to talk about all of Telemachus's voyage. Pick something small. Generally speaking, guys, pick things that are too large. You're not able to say, you don't have enough space to say all the things that really could or should be said. You don't need to use any external sources. In fact, I recommend that you don't, but I won't require it. If there's something, for example, from another class that you see a connection to, you could write about that and then, refer to what it is that you're referring to. When you're working with these response papers, you're telling me your thoughts about some part of the book. It could be you thought something was good or bad, effective, not effective, confusing. You need to make it very clear what it is that you're referring to. You should be ideally quoting directly from the book, but at least giving very clear information directly from the book. In addition, tell me where you're getting that information from. You can just give me a page number, that's fine, because we know what work we're talking about. If you use something from some other book or some other source, you'll need to tell me what that is. Just put it in parentheses right after it, say this is where I got this from. If you're reading Animal Farm, another class, you can say Animal Farm chapter or whatever. Spelling, grammar, format, same deal, but here we're mostly focusing on this response. I want to hear your thoughts about the book. I want to see that you can express them in an intelligent way that refers to the book itself. If you're just saying your sort of general thoughts without any reference to the book, it's hard for me to respond to that, to see what it is that you're getting your information from if you don't tell me where to look. Yes, I know the book. Okay, it's a large, long book. It's thousands of lines of poetry. All right, questions about this? These are more difficult than the creative writing assignments. The hardest thing is going to be coming up with a topic that you're able to say enough things about. Questions, comments, concerns? No? All right. The poems. This week, for sure, you should pick a poem that you want to learn. One of these three. Otherwise, you get extra credit. But really, listen to them when I'm reciting them. Listen to other recordings of people saying them. Get a feel for them. Memorization requires a sort of deep knowledge of the poem. Yes, you can memorize one word after another. It's going to be really hard if you're memorizing something in a foreign language. If I were to try to memorize a poem in Chinese, it would just be a series of meaningless sounds to me because I don't know Chinese. I could do it if I sat down and I memorized all the sounds. It would be really hard, and I wouldn't get very much out of it. But if I spoke Chinese, it would be different. First of all, it'd be easier for me to remember because I know these words. I'm familiar with the grammar. I know what poetry in Chinese is supposed to sound like. When we're memorizing it, it's becoming a part of you. It's getting stuck inside of you. You gain a deeper familiarity with it. And poetry really benefits from being savored in this way. So please pick, no later than Friday, I would recommend, which one you're going to do, and start learning it. Ask questions about it. You can ask me, you can ask other people. So today, I'm just going to read aloud. I'll do the two on the back. and maybe say one or two things about each of them. On first looking into Chapman's Homer by John Keats. Much have I traveled in the realms of gold, and many goodly states and kingdoms seen. Round many western islands have I been, which bards in fealty to Apollo hold. Oft of one wide expanse had I been told that deep-browed Homer ruled his demesne. Yet did I never breathe its pure serene, till I heard Chapman speak out loud and bold. Then felt I like some watcher of the skies, when a new planet swims into his ken. Or like stout Cortez, when with eagle eyes he stared at the Pacific, and all his men looked at each other with a wild surmise, silent upon a peak in Darien. A couple words there I want to mention. Fealty, in that fourth line, fealty means loyalty. Fealty is the oath that you would swear to your master. So these bards hold these islands, he says, in fealty to Apollo, the god of poetry. These islands are dedicated to Apollo and ruled by poets. Please put that away. He says, I've traveled to these islands. He doesn't mean literal islands here. He means these islands of poetry. I've read a lot of poetry. I've been to many of these islands in the realms of gold, this classical ancient poetry. Then the second four lines, demesne means the area, like domain. It means the area that you have control over. He said, often, I'd been told of some wide expanse, some large area, that Homer ruled it. Okay, lots of people told me, this is Homer's island. But he says, I never really breathed the air, yet did I never breathe its pure serene, till I heard Chapman speak out loud and bold. Like a watcher of the skies, when a new planet swims into his ken. Ken means knowledge or awareness. So an astronomer who sees a new planet. And then we talked about Cortez looking at the Pacific for the first time from a mountaintop in the forest of Darien. All right, then let's go to the opening of the Odyssey. Alexander Pope, translated. The man, for wisdom's various arts renowned, long exercised in woes, O muse resound, who when his arms had wrought the destined fall of sacred Troy, and raised her heaven-built wall, wandering from clime to clime, observant strayed, their manners noted, and their states surveyed. On stormy seas unnumbered toils he bore, safe with his friends to gain his natal shore. Vain toils, their impious folly dared to prey on herds devoted to the god of day. The god vindictive doomed them nevermore, amen unblessed, to touch that natal shore. O snatch some portion of these acts from fate, celestial muse, and to our world relate. Impious or impious means disrespectful of the gods. Their impious folly, their foolishness against the gods, dared to eat herds of cattle devoted to the god of day. Who's the god of day? Anyone? This is also Apollo. These two here, if you look closely at them, I think there are a lot of interesting things you could say. The opening of the Odyssey, Keats, on first looking into Chapman's Homer, is very clearly inspired by that. Right? In the opening of the Odyssey here, we learn that Odysseus had traveled to many lands, their manners noted and their states surveyed. What kind of people are they? What sort of... the reference to Apollo in both of them. All right, questions about either of those? Let's move on to Homer, book 9. Open up to page 221. Odysseus and his men are trapped in this cave with the Cyclops, who's just eaten 2 of Odysseus' men. And they're stuck there because they can't get the stone away from the door. They kill the Cyclops, they'll be trapped. So 221, line 344. When young Dawn, with her rose-red fingers shone once more, the monster relit his fire and milked his handsome ewes, each in order, putting a suckling underneath each dam. And as soon as he briskly finished all his chores, he snatched up 2 more men and fixed his meal. Well fed, he drove his fat sheep from the cave, lightly lifting the huge door slab up and away, then slipped it back in place as a hunter flips the lid of his quiver shut. Piercing whistles, turning his flocks to the hills, he left me there, the heart inside me brooding on revenge. How could I pay him back? Would Athena give me glory? Here was the plan that struck my mind as best. The Cyclops' great club. There it lay by the pens, olive wood, full of sap. He had lopped it off to brandish once it dried. Looking it over, we judged it big enough to be the mast of a pitch-black ship with her. Now I chopped off a fathom's length, rolled it to comrades, told them to plane it down, and they made the club smooth as I bent and shaved the tip to a stabbing point. I turned it over the blazing fire to char it good and hard, then hid it well, buried deep under the dung that littered the cabin's floor in thick, wet clumps. And now I ordered my shipmates all to cast lots. Who would brave it out with me to hoist our stake and grind it into his eye when sleep had overcome him? Luck of the draw, I got the very ones I would have picked myself. 4 good men, and I in the lead made 5. Nightfall brought him back, herding his woolly sheep, and he quickly drove the sleek flock into the vaulted cavern, rams and all, none left outside in the walled yard. His own idea, perhaps, or a god led him on. Then he hoisted the huge slab to block the door and squatted to milk his sheep and bleating goats, each in order, putting a suckling underneath each dam. And as soon as he'd briskly finished all his chores, he snatched up 2 more men and fixed his meal. But this time, I lifted a carved wooden bowl brimful of my ruddy wine and went right up to the Cyclops, enticing, "Here, Cyclops, try this wine, to top off the banquet of human flesh you bolted down. Judge for yourself what stock our ship had stored. I brought it here to make you a fine libation, hoping you would pity me, Cyclops, send me home. But your rages are insufferable. You barbarian, how can any man on earth come visit you after this? What you've done outrages all that's right." At that, he seized the bowl and tossed it off, and the heady wine pleased him immensely. "More," he demanded a second bowl, "a hearty helping. And tell me your name now, quickly, so I can hand my guest a gift to warm his heart. Our soil yields the Cyclops powerful, full-bodied wine, and the rains from Zeus build its strength. But this is nectar, ambrosia. This flows from heaven." So he declared. I poured him another fiery bowl. 3 bowls I brimmed, and 3 he drank to the last drop, the fool. And then when the wine was swirling round his brain, I approached my host with a cordial winning word. "So you asked me the name I'm known by, Cyclops. I will tell you, but you must give me a guest gift, as you promised." "Nobody. That's my name, Nobody. So my mother and father call me, all my friends." But he boomed back at me from his ruthless heart, "Nobody? I'll eat Nobody last of all his friends. I'll eat the others first. That's my gift to you." With that, he toppled over, sprawled full length, flat on his back, and lay there, his massive neck slumping to one side, and sleep that conquers all overwhelmed him now, as wine came spurting, flooding up from his gullet with chunks of human flesh. He vomited, blind drunk. Now at last I thrust our stake in a bed of embers to get it red hot, and rallied all my comrades. "Courage! No panic, no one hang back now." And green as it was, just as the olive stake was about to catch fire, the glow terrific, yes, I dragged it from the flames, my men clustering round, as some god breathed enormous courage through us all. Hoisting high that olive stake with its stabbing point, straight into the monster's eye they rammed it hard. I drove my weight on it from above and bored it home, as a shipwright bores his beam with a shipwright's drill that men below, whipping the strap back and forth, whirl, and the drill keeps twisting faster, never stopping. So we seized our stake with its fiery tip and bored it round and round in the giant's eye till blood came boiling up around that smoking shaft, and the hot blast singed his brow and islands round the core, and the broiling eyeball burst. Its crackling roots blazed and hissed, as a blacksmith plunges a glowing axe or adze in an ice-cold bath, and the metal screeches steam, and its temper hardens. That's the iron strength. So the eye of the Cyclops sizzled round that stake. He loosed a hideous roar. The rock walls echoed round, and we scuttled back in terror. The monster wrenched the spike from his eye, and out it came with a red geyser of blood. He flung it aside with frantic hands, and mad with pain he bellowed out for help from his neighbor Cyclops, living round about in caves on windswept crags. Hearing his cries, they lumbered up from every side, and hulking round his cavern, asked what ailed him. "What, Polyphemus? What in the world's the trouble? Roaring out in the God-sent night to rob us of our sleep? Surely no one's rustling your flocks against your will. Surely no one's trying to kill you now by fraud or force." "Nobody, friends!" Polyphemus bellowed back from his cave. "Nobody's killing me now by fraud and not by force." "If you're alone," his friends boomed back at once, "and nobody's trying to overpower you, now look, it must be a plague sent here by mighty Zeus, and there's no escape from that. You'd better pray to your father, Lord Poseidon." They lumbered off, but laughter filled my heart to think how nobody's name, my great cunning stroke, had duped them one and all. But the Cyclops there still groaning, racked with agony, groped around for the huge slab, and heaving it from the doorway, down he sat in the cave's mouth, his arms spread wide, hoping to catch a comrade stealing out with sheep. Such a blithering fool he took me for. But I was already plotting. What was the best way out? How could I find escape from death for my crew, myself as well? My wits kept weaving cunning schemes, life at stake, monstrous death staring us in the face, till this plan struck my mind as best. That flock, those well-fed rams with their splendid thick fleece, sturdy, handsome beasts, sporting their dark weight of wool. I lashed them abreast quietly, twisting the willow twigs the Cyclops slept on. Giant, lawless brute. I took them 3 by 3. Each ram in the middle bore a man, while the 2 rams either side would shield him well. So 3 beasts to bear each man. But as for myself, there was one bellwether ram, the prize of all the flock, and clutching him by his back, tucked up under his shaggy belly, there I hung face upward, both hands locked in his marvelous deep fleece, clinging for dear life, my spirit steeled, enduring. So we held on desperate, waiting dawn's first light. As soon as young dawn with her rose-red fingers shone once more, the rams went rumbling out of the cave toward pasture. The ewes kept bleating round the pens unmilked, their udders about to burst. Their master, now heaving in torment, felt the back of each animal halting before him, but the idiot never sensed my men were trussed up under their thick, fleecy ribs. And last of them all came my great ram now, striding out, weighed down with his dense wool and my deep plots. Stroking him gently, powerful Polyphemus murmured, "Dear old ram, why last of the flock to quit the cave? In the good old days, you'd never lag behind the rest. You with your long marching strides, first by far of the flock to graze the fresh young grasses, first by far to reach the rippling streams, first to turn back home, keen for your fold when night comes on. But now, you're last of all. And why? Sick at heart for your master's eye, that coward gouged out with his wicked crew, only after he'd stunned my wits with wine, that nobody, who's not escaped death, I swear, not yet. Oh, if only you thought like me, had words like me, to tell me where that scoundrel was cringing from my rage, I'd smash him against the ground, I'd spill his brains, flooding across my cave, 226. And that would ease my heart of the pains that good-for-nothing nobody made me suffer." And with that threat, he let my ram go free outside. But soon as we'd got 1 foot past cave and courtyard, first I loosed myself from the ram, and then loosed my men. Then quickly, glancing back and again, we drove our flock, good, plump beasts with their long shanks, straight to the ship. And a welcome sight we were to loyal comrades, we who'd escaped our deaths. But for all the rest, they broke down and wailed. I cut it short. I stopped each shipmate's cries, my head tossing, brows frowning, silent signals to hurry, tumble our fleecy herd on board, launch out on the open sea. They swung aboard, they sat to the oars in ranks, and in rhythm churned the water white with stroke on stroke. But once offshore, as far as a man's shout can carry, I called back to the Cyclops, stinging taunts. "So, Cyclops, no weak coward it was whose crew you bent to devour there in your vaulted cave, you with your brute force. Your filthy crimes came down on your own head, you shameless cannibal, daring to eat your guests in your own house. So Zeus and the other gods have paid you back." That made the rage of the monster boil over. Ripping off the peak of a towering crag, he heaved it so hard the boulder landed just in front of our dark prow, and a huge swell reared up as the rock went plunging under, a tidal wave from the open sea. The sudden backwash drove us landward again, forcing us close inshore, but grabbing a long pole, I thrust us off and away, tossing my head for dear life, signaling crews to put their backs in the oars, escape grim death. They threw themselves in the labor, rowed on fast, but once we'd plowed the breakers twice as far, again I began to taunt the Cyclops. Men around me trying to check me, calm me left and right. So headstrong, why? Why rile the beast again? That rock he flung in the sea just now, hurling our ship to shore once more, we thought we'd die on the spot. If he'd caught a sound from one of us, just a moan, he would have crushed our heads and ship timbers with one heave of another, flashing jagged rock. Good God, the brute can throw. The face of the earth should ask you who blinded you, shamed you so. Say Odysseus, raider of cities, he gouged out your eye, Laertes' son, who makes his home in Ithaca. So I vaunted, and he groaned back in answer, Oh, no, no, that prophecy years ago. It all comes home to me with a vengeance now. We once had a prophet here, a great tall man, Telemus, Eurymus' son, a master at reading signs, who grew old in his trade among his fellow Cyclops. All this, he warned me, would come to pass someday, that I'd be blinded here at the hands of one Odysseus. But I always looked for handsome giant man to cross my path, some fighter clad in power like armor plate. But now, look what a dwarf, a spineless good-for-nothing, stuns me with wine, then gouges out my eye. Come here, Odysseus. Let me give you a guest gift and urge Poseidon, the earthquake god, to speed you home. I am his son, and he claims to be my father, true, and he himself will heal me if he pleases. No other blessed god, no man could do the work. Heal you? Here was my parting shot. Would to God I could strip you of life and breath and ship you down to the house of death as surely as no one will ever heal your eye, not even your earthquake god himself. But at that he bellowed out toward Poseidon, thrusting his arms at the starry skies, and prayed, Hear me, Poseidon, god of the sea-blue mane who rocks the earth. If I really am your son and you claim to be my father, come grant that Odysseus, raider of cities, Laertes' son who makes his home in Ithaca, never reaches home. Or if he's fated to see his people once again and reach his well-built house and his own native country, let him come home late and come a broken man, all shipmates lost, alone in a stranger's ship, and let him find a world of pain at home. So he prayed, and the god of the sea-blue mane, Poseidon, heard his prayer. The monster suddenly hoisted a boulder far larger, wheeled and heaved it, putting his weight behind it. Massive strength, and the boulder crashed close, landing just in the wake of our dark stern, just failing to graze the rudder's bladed edge. A huge swell reared up as the rock went plunging under, yes, and the tidal breaker drove us out to our island's far shore, where all my well-decked ships lay moored, clustered, waiting, and huddled round them crewmen sat in anguish, waiting, chafing for our return. We beached our vessel hard ashore on the sand. We swung out in the frothing surf ourselves, and herding Cyclops sheep from our deep holds, we shared them round, so no one, not on my account, would go deprived of his fair share of spoils. But the splendid ram, as we meted out the flocks, my friends in arms made him my prize of honor, mine alone, and I slaughtered him on the beach and burnt his thighs to Cronus' mighty son, Zeus of the thundercloud who rules the world. But my sacrifices failed to move the god. Zeus was still obsessed with plans to destroy my entire oar-swept fleet and loyal crew of comrades. Now, all day long till the sun went down, we sat and feasted on sides of meat and heady wine. Then when the sun had set and night came on, we lay down and slept at the water's shelving edge. When young Dawn with her rose-red fingers shone once more, I roused the men straight away, ordering all crews to man the ships and cast off cables quickly. They swung aboard at once. They sat to the oars in ranks and in rhythm turned the water white with stroke on stroke. And from there we sailed on, glad to escape our death, yet sick at heart for the comrades we had lost. Odysseus is particularly affected by this encounter. Yes, he lost some men in Ismarus. Yes, he had this incident on the island of the Lotus Eaters, but the Cyclops is different. He spends so much time describing the whole event in detail. The horror of it. I think horror is the right word. It's easy for us. We're not used to picturing things in our minds as much as the Greeks were. We're used to seeing visuals, movies, photographs. But stop and take a moment to picture these scenes. Odysseus shows up here with his men, a dozen of his men, his best fighting men, whom he's been traveling with for the past 10 or more years. Or he's been with, because they were in the war with him. And then this sudden, violent, horrifying death being eaten on top of that. And this cave, the sheep and the goats spend the night in the cave. Their droppings are all over the floor. The only way they're able to trick this savage is by, after he's vomited up wine and the flesh of Odysseus' dead comrades. In addition to that, this encounter has an effect on the rest of Odysseus' voyages. Why? Why does this affect everything else that happens to Odysseus after this point? He's the leader, but there are these other experiences like the ones on Ismarus or with the Lotus Eaters that just sort of get mentioned quickly. There are some others that he mentions where he loses men that don't seem to be quite as crucial as this one. What else is it about in terms of the plot? Not only does it affect him personally in this very deep way because of the trauma of experiencing this, but also in terms of the plot, something happens that's going to affect the rest of his journeys. This Cyclops Polyphemus whom he blinds, what connections does he have? Who's Polyphemus connected to? Anybody? Poseidon. Poseidon is his father, the sea god. And as Odysseus is leaving, Polyphemus curses him. They almost escaped without this. Remember, the Greek gods are not omniscient. They don't know everything. Poseidon's not around to witness any of this. Polyphemus didn't know who this guy was. Why is he able to curse Odysseus and make sure that Poseidon is going to take this out on Odysseus specifically? Right, Odysseus, as they're leaving, as the Cyclops is hurling these boulders at their ship, Odysseus, in his rage, in his joy at having blinded the Cyclops and escaped, but his rage and this at having lost these men, keeps shouting out to the Cyclops, taunting him, and finally gets to the point where he tells him his name, not only Odysseus, but who his father is, where he's from, what he's known for. It's not like Odysseus has a last name. There could be other Greeks named Odysseus. But no, son of Laertes, from Ithaca. What does he say? What is it? Destroyer of cities? Raider of cities? Raider of cities. He gives Polyphemus plenty of information on how to find him. This boasting. The victory is a good thing. It's good that he rejoices in it, but it goes beyond where it should. Here's an example, we've mentioned this word before, of hubris, this pride. Taking this glory in a good thing here in this defeat of the Cyclops and not controlling it. And it's going to come back to bite Odysseus. It's an easy mistake to make. Very easy. He's emotional. He's on the ship. He thinks he's gotten away. Cyclops keeps missing them with these rocks. And yet, he, and especially his men, are going to suffer because of it. Very common theme in Greek literature. Epic and tragedy. In a sense, epic is a kind of tragedy. That you have these small mistakes that snowball into larger things that we can't escape. All right, that's all for today. Thank you very much. Book 9 questions will be due tomorrow.